Well, welcome. My name is Liz McGill. I'm the Dean of the Stanford Law School, and I'm delighted to welcome you today for the presentation of the inaugural Bright Award at Stanford University, the award for environmental sustainability. I want to thank everyone who was involved in this process that led to the selection of our terrific first recipient. Buzz Thompson, who you'll hear from later, who is a law professor and the co-director of the Woods Institute of the Environment, led the committee very ably, and Kathy Jossman of the law school, who is here, worked very hard on this set of events here. Before I tell you a little bit about Tasso, the inaugural recipient of the Bright Award, I want to talk a little bit about the vision of the individual who came up with the Bright Award, and that is Ray Bright. The prize was made possible by a very generous gift to Stanford Law School from the law school's alum, Ray Bright, the class of 1953, and his wife, Marcel. I'm incredibly happy that Ray's brother here, Mike, and his wife, Jane, could be here with us today, and I thank them. And is Alan Markle here? He will be here soon, a longtime friend of the family, and Ray's brother, George, who could not be here today, but they all were instrumental in the development of and then implementation of this vision that Ray had in the creation of the award. As a child, Ray Bright spent countless hours outdoors with his father, who was a park ranger in the Mount Rainier National Park. At age 4, he became the youngest person to scale the 10,000-foot peak of Mount Rainier in Washington State. His passion for the outdoors carried with him throughout his life, and he and Marcel made frequent visits to Yosemite, to Death Valley, and other natural wonders in the United States and in the world. As Ray's brother George explained, our brother wanted to make sure that the things he enjoyed in his life, others could enjoy in the future. And he wanted to do something to sustain and enhance the experience in the human environment. With this award, Ray and Marcel particularly sought to recognize unsung, unheralded individuals who were actively leading efforts to protect or reinvigorate an area and lead an area to a more environmentally sustainable and sound future. He hoped the award and the recognition that came with it would allow the recipient to have an even greater impact and larger influence after receiving the award. He, in other words, recognized that there were many unsung and unheralded individuals in the world doing work to contribute to the sustainability of the globe all over the world. And he wanted the award to be rotated through regions of the world to recognize those individuals and enhance their capacity to make a difference. The first Bright Award will be awarded to Tasso Azevedo of Brazil. Let me tell you a little bit about him before he speaks to us today. Tasso began his forestry career in 1995, soon after graduating from the University of Sao Paulo, where he founded a really quite incredible nonprofit called Imaflora, about which you're going to hear in a moment. He led that organization until 2002. In 2003, Tasso was appointed Brazil's National Forest Program Director in the Ministry of the Environment, and he introduced new goals and incentives to promote sustainable forestry in the country. This resulted in nearly doubling the annual area of planted forests and the area of natural forest managed in the country of Brazil. He then implemented and chaired the National Forest Commission, where he managed to find common ground among individuals who rarely find common ground: NGOs, loggers, the forestry industry, indigenous people, unions, scientists, and government officials. The commission proposed a bill to reform regulations and practices in public forests in the country, which comprise 75% of the Amazon. After this law was approved, the president nominated Tasso as the first chief and director general of the Brazilian Forest Service. During this time, he instituted an innovative forest concession model whereby any party wishing to bid for a long-term contract to harvest forest products had to first detail the social benefits and environmental care that the operation would implement. In 2003 and 2004, Tasso collaborated with public agencies, nonprofit organizations, and sustainable businesses to defeat the illegal traffic in mahogany, one of the most endangered and expensive timber products in the market. A task force apprehended more than 10,000 cubic meters of logs. The timber was sold through certified companies, and the profits were donated to an endowment fund to benefit the local communities from which the mahogany had been harvested and had been targeted by illegal loggers. Within just a couple of months' time, the illegal market in mahogany virtually collapsed as a result of these actions. These experiences inspired the creation of the National Plan to Combat Deforestation in the Amazon, which decreased the deforestation rate by an extraordinary 50% as of 2007 and 80% as of 2012. I will repeat those figures because they're really quite extraordinary. That the implementation of that plan led to a 50% reduction in deforestation in 2007 and an 80% reduction by 2012. Historically, deforestation had been the single most important source of greenhouse gas emissions from Brazil, representing 2/3 of all emissions in 2005, and Brazil was at the time the 5th largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. Thanks to the work of Tasso and others, there have been 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions avoided since 2005, by far the greatest contribution of any country in the world to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, according to the UN Environmental Program. These achievements inspired Tasso to propose yet another innovative entity, the Amazon Fund, a fund dedicated entirely to promoting forest conservation in the Amazon and monitoring forests around the world. It was established in 2008. It is currently the largest forest conservation fund in the world. It has a commitment of $1 billion from the Norwegian government to continuously reduce deforestation. Tasso is someone who never rests, and lately he's been working on a system to estimate the greenhouse gas emissions in all of the sectors of Brazil's economy as an open data source in partnership with more than 30 civil society organizations. Given the past accomplishments that Tasso has achieved, I have no doubt that this is going to make an incredibly significant contribution to a sustainable future for Brazil, the region, and the world. I think it's really fitting that this award is both at Stanford and that our first awardee is Tasso. At Stanford, we are very committed to working across disciplines to tackle the world's most difficult problems, and environmental sustainability is very high on the list. Students and faculty from across campus, from earth sciences to the business school, to the law school, to the university-wide Woods Institute, co-directed by Professor Thompson, are doing important work on this issue. In Silicon Valley, it's appropriate that we honor an environmental leader who has used technology in innovative ways to monitor deforestation. And in a place where we frequently honor entrepreneurs who build great companies, we are also honoring social entrepreneurs like Tasso, who've used creativity and drive and, just face it, flat out enormous talent to make the world a better place. It takes a very special person to have the kind of impact that Tasso has had, and from every interaction we have had with him, it has been confirmed that he is a special person. He's living proof that there's really no limit to what you can do if you don't mind who gets the credit. In Tasso's case, though, it may be that he does mind who gets the credit. He doesn't really want to get the credit. When I contacted him to inform him that he had been selected as the inaugural recipient of the Bright Award at Stanford, his reaction to me in an email was, "How did you find me?" It's no accident, then, I think, that his accomplishments know no limits. It was an incredible honor to be able to have the privilege to select Tasso as the inaugural recipient of the Bright Award. A recipient, I believe, honors the vision of Ray Bright, and a joy personally for me to be able to inform him of the exciting news. So we are going to show you a short video, which I think really captures the wonders of what Tasso has done, and then I will present him with the award and he'll make some remarks.
name is Tasso Azevedo. I'm a social environmental entrepreneur from São Paulo, Brazil. Water is important for everything in Brazil. Specifically, it's very curious how it's important for our economy. Our water is produced mainly from our forests. Forest in Brazil is something that is kind of it's in the soul of the people. So we have this connection that we need the forest to maintain the water, and we need the water to maintain our economy. The climate change, it's something that is impacting and can impact forests and the water. For us to think about the climate change and act on all the ways possible to limit the climate change is absolutely crucial for our simple survival as an economy, as a society, and for all the environment.
The Bright Award at Stanford University is a prize given to individuals who are unheralded and have made great contributions to conservation and sustainability. The prize is given worldwide. It's the only one of its kind in the world, and it is the highest environmental prize given by Stanford University. Stanford Law School, in collaboration with the Woods Institute, worked up the nominations and made recommendations about who the winner would be, and Buzz Thompson, who is both at the law school and a co-director of the Woods Institute, played an instrumental role. The inaugural winner is a forest manager from Brazil. His name is Tasso Azevedo. He has made remarkable contributions in the course of his career to limiting deforestation in the country of Brazil. Imaflora, the nonprofit that he founded early in his career, became an organization that certified forests. Tasso had the insight that you needed to understand the economics of timber in order to slow down deforestation. They certified 7.5 million acres of forests in Brazil and really changed the market for timber and wood in the world, I think, but certainly in Brazil because people sought that certification.
One of the best ways to conserve forests is to manage the forest, is to use the forest. If you use the forest, you know how important is the forest. You want to maintain the forest. If you just keep forest as something like, to set aside for, have a dream that the forest is there, it will happen that one day you will not be there watching, and the forest go, and then what's the point? You don't feel the connection. To organize this connection is one of the big challenges, and I think we quite successfully did that in the last 20 years.
Tasso was then asked to hold various positions in the National Forest Service in Brazil, including being the first director of the Brazilian National Forest Service. One of the things he did in his various government positions is he was instrumental in helping stop the illegal trade in mahogany. His most recent, very prominent action has been being a key player in the development of the Brazilian National Forest Plan, the plan that has led to dramatic reductions in the amount of deforestation happening in Brazil.
This is the emissions from deforestation in the Amazon. It was growing. We got a peak of 1.5 gigatons, 1.5 billion tons just from deforestation in the Amazon. And by fighting deforestation, it comes down to about 250. Because we actually proved to ourselves that we could decrease emissions on this scale, we could influence the policy in Brazil for the other sectors, saying, we can do this in other places. And I think we also influence other countries that could believe that if Brazil could reduce this amount of, emissions from the most difficult sector for us, which is land use change, it's very complex and so on. We can do it in other places. I think it can inspire, developed countries to make same transformations on energy, and can inspire other developing countries that have problems on land use change, that can also, get inspired to do some transformation.
Every problem he has looked at, from deforestation to the mahogany trade to climate change, he's thought about all of the different actors who have to be brought to the table. There has to be an honest broker, like Tasso is, to get them to talk to one another and agree on a plan that can advance the interests of the whole country and really the whole world, that none of them would individually do. But Tasso is the kind of person who sees that they have to be brought together, brings them together, and is therefore able to make progress.
Transparency is the best tool against corruption. This idea that you are transparent, that you make things visible, but then you give access, but I give you access in a way that it's really useful and helpful, because I really want you to use that information. I really want you to come back to me and ask for the things. For me, transparency is a principle. It's not a qualification of a process. It's like you are or you are not. Sustainability is the same thing. I mean, you don't do things sustainably. You act sustainably. It's your behavior that could be sustainable. So for me, it's a principle. The same way as we have the principle of freedom of press, for example, or human rights. Nobody questioned it. And I think sustainability should be the same thing. I think every time the humanity got to a point where you have a problem that was larger than what you think you could solve, it creates a momentum where the force join together to find out how we can fight this thing. I think we will get to a point in the next, coming years where the problem of climate change will create this situation where we have to make some movements on a large scale. And once we achieve a point where we have the peak of emissions and we start to go descend, I'm absolutely sure that we will accelerate that. It will be difficult to turn. The turning point will be difficult, but once we get on the turning point, the ability of the people to transform the whole thing on opportunities is immense. We say that we move ourselves by love or by pain, right? And I think that this point where the two things will happen together is about to come. Maybe 2015 is a start for that. But will come. I will see that.
Well, please join me in welcoming the first and inaugural winner of the Bright Award at Stanford University, Tasso Azevedo.
Now I speak?
Yes.
I haven't seen the video before, so. What I do? Well, I wrote something because to be able to be on the, be sure that I say something smart. So I'll try to read something and get some ideas. First, obviously, I'm very honored to be here and to accept the prize. Was quite a surprise, as was described. And obviously, I want to thank the Stanford University, the Bright family, the faculties that give their time to me during these 2 days to talk about different things, because we were not talking about forestry when we were talking with them in these last days. The students that have been with me the other days and people that were in the committee, I'm very glad that you find me. Now I learned how you find me minutes ago. Very thorough process. I also need to thank my wife, Anna, and hey, my daughter, Clara, she's 4 years old. And the thing with my daughter is that I'm working with sustainability for many years, and I think I just realized what is to talk about sustainability and next generations is when I have a daughter, because kind of I have a meaning, right? And I asked her to come to be here with us, and she said, that I can't come because it's my last week in school before summer break, and she have to rehearsal for the arts presentation on next Friday. And she looked at me and said, "You better be here next Friday," right? So I'm flying back
tomorrow. And then this morning I was talking with her, and then she said, I know that you have the prize and etc., but will you be here on Friday? That's the important thing. So I'll be there on Friday because she's the next generation. Well, anyway, back in 2002, I stepped down from the leadership of Imaflora, that organization that I found 7, 8 years before, to promote forest and agriculture management certification. And I stepped down not because, the people expel me or send me home or I get bored or anything like that. Actually, Imaflora was almost like an addiction, something that I live my entire life doing, morning and afternoon, etc. But from just the start of that, I get this idea that if I want to prove that something is sustainable as an institution, I have to leave the institution. That's the way I will prove that it's sustainable. And it's something so that was my first let it go. So I went out of the organization to pass on to other colleagues to lead the organization. And I was thinking what I would do next. And so I was considering to take a break and study somehow, do something different. So I came to US, visit some schools. So I went to Harvard, then I went to Yale, Wharton, ended up being here in Stanford, looking around, found it very fascinating here, liked the spot, say, you know what, I will apply to study here actually. So I come back and apply for an MBA in Stanford. And probably I did something wrong because I never get a reply. And because I never got a reply, I actually, while I was 18, I have this invitation to go to help the Minister of Environment, Marina Silva, on setting up the new government with Lula. And then, because I didn't come here, I end up being in the government and doing some of the stuff that we have here. So you can imagine that I was quite surprised to receive an email some weeks ago, out of the blue, because even a website of Bright Awards didn't exist, so it was impossible to know exactly what it's all about, from Jean Elizabeth Megill, informing that I was nominated for an inaugural winner of the Bright Awards at Stanford. Well, to be honest, and I tell the story to them, I actually put on the junk mail box because I just saw this award thing, like this Nigeria email saying that you received $1 million or something like that. So I thought it's just one of those and just put it the junk mail. Because I have this conversation with my wife later on saying, this guy is getting very sophisticated on junk mail, and I'll make Stanford to convince you or something. And she said, one day you will delete something that is important just because you don't want to read. So at that night, I decided to read the email, and I found out that actually, if this is a scam, it's a very good scam that they have a lot of information about me, or NSA is involved, I don't know, something like that. So actually, yeah, that's it. So then I make this question, how you find me? It's really interesting. But by giving this award to me, you're not honoring me, and I don't feel like that. I think you're doing this with thousands of people with whom I had the privilege to learn, work, interact, and collaborate to create those innovative solutions for some very complex challenges, such as fighting deforestation and climate change. And I could not even try to make a list of the people because it will be like hours here, and some of them are here actually. But I just feel that I'm very lucky. I think I was in the right place at the right time with the right people to do the right thing in the right way to the benefit of the right cause. That's more or less the sentence. I'm just very lucky. I mean, for some reason, I was in the right place where it was needed, something that I could offer to a group of people to make it turn into something good. So take that as an honor for many people and not just me. So I want to take this opportunity to talk to you and share with you some of my experience on dealing with two very interconnected subjects, forests and climate change, and how they keep challenging and inspire me on what I'm doing. And what probably I will be doing on the next years. I grew up in São Paulo, which is not really a forest place. It's much less forest than here. Actually, I was born in Berlin, in Germany. My parents lived there for a while, but I grew up since I was less than 1 year old in São Paulo. And I grew up thinking that I would be a kind of aeronautic engineering, make airplanes and things like that, like mathematician, this kind of stuff. Then I prepared myself to be an actor, doing very seriously a job to get there. And I end up becoming a forester. And I think what attracts me to forests was this unusual combination of social, environmental, and economic challenge posed by this amazing profession. Then, especially living in a place like Brazil, that Brazil is the only country in the world that has the name of a tree. Brazil is actually from pau-brasil, which is what you call rosewood, I think. It's the one that make the violin bows. Good quality. This will be made on pau-brasil. And large forests. So, although people in my family thought that if I would be a forester, then I would be a kind of, a guard that stayed with the hat taking care of the bears or something like that. That was my choice. Forest is actually everywhere. So if we look around here, timber and non-timber forest products, they aren't even in place that we can't imagine. I mean, they are in the paper, in our clothes, in the building, probably in the floor, in the ceiling, in the automobiles, in machines, on the medicines. Everything that surrounds us is somehow connected to forests. Everything we eat. Forests are essential to regulate climate, and in certain parts of the world, it can make up to 70% of the evaporation that makes the rain, and that's the case in Brazil. It's not the ocean, it's the forest. The bomb is the forest. Forests make us to connect to our origins because it holds life such in a diverse way that there's no way a man-made environment could match anything close to what forests can give us. And so I think this connects us to life. Forest represents about 10% of the of the planet's surface. And if we take just the land, this is about 30%. So let's say 4 billion hectares. 4 billion hectares. This is the size of US plus Canada plus China plus Brazil, more or less. Like if you take the whole land, this is 4 billion hectares. Most of that, 3/4 of that, is on the temperate zone. Just 25%, if each 4 hectares, are actually tropical forests. But those 25%, it holds 50% of the carbon. It holds over 90% of the species. So it's a kind of a unique place. Half of those tropical forests are in Brazil. Very significant. Forests don't grow in deserts, don't grow on ice, which cover another big chunk of our planet. So in order to get space to live, produce food and energy, we have been cutting down the forests to give space to other land uses. So over the last 5,000 years, we've lost 1/3 of our 6 billion hectares of original forest. That was the land that we have in forest 5,000 years ago. So we lose 2 billion hectares. But more interesting is that the loss of forests was significantly concentrated on the last century. We lost 1 billion hectares in just 100 years, the last 100 years. It was a very interesting pattern. The first billion on the last 5,000 years was on temperate forests. And almost all this 1 billion hectares that we lose in this century was tropical forests. That's where we are now. Although some of the deforestation were caused by overharvesting for forest products, most of that are related to the land use change to open space for agriculture, pasture, cities, and infrastructure. Until the 19th century, most of deforestation would concentrate on temperate forests, and now, even today, simply tropical forests. The cumulative loss of forests in the tropics in the last century is equivalent to the loss of an area which is almost the double of US. That's the size of what we lose. In the 90s, of the last century, 90s, it achieved a peak of 16 million hectares per year of loss of forest cover. So every year, 16 million hectares. That's the size of Florida. So imagine a Florida every year ripped up on the map in terms of forest in tropics. Because in temperate forest is more or less stable now. Well, this is the bad news. We have some good news, actually. In the last decade, that was from 2000 to 2010, for the first time in 100 years that we are measuring that, the average deforestation rate per year decreased from 16 million hectares that I mentioned before to 13 million hectares. It's the first time that we have this decline. It's good news. So, how Brazil fits on the scene? Why it's important, what we are doing there? Brazil has 500 million hectares of forest and 500 million hectares of forest. So this is about 12% of the forest cover. So if you take all the forests in the world. It's the second largest forest in the world. You know, Brazilians always think that we are the largest on everything. You know, we always say that. But in fact, not in this case, we are not. Russia has the double. Russia has almost 1 billion hectares of temperate forest. Now, 25% of the deforestation that happened on the 90s happened in Brazil. So we have 12% of the forest, but we have 25% of all the deforestation. In 2003, 2004 alone, just 1 year, in the space of between July 2003 and August 2004, the loss of deforestation in Brazil, if you consider all the types of forests, was about 4 million hectares. 1 year, 4 million hectares. That's the size of Denmark. So take out one country from other country, right, in terms of area. Most of that were clear cuts in the Amazon forest, 2.7 million hectares, and almost all of that illegal. Means they had no authorization, no rights to actually do what they were doing. At this point, I was starting my job as director of the National Forest Program at the federal government. And there was a firm political decision from the president with the ministers to fight back deforestation in the Amazon. They take it as something, as a national priority. We have to deal with it. Even just for political reason, like, you know, you can do everything well on environment in Brazil, but if deforestation is going up, you'll be seen bad. You can do everything bad in Brazil on environment, but if deforestation is coming down, then you look good. Actually, it's what's happening right now. Many things going bad on environment, but deforestation is coming down, and then they are good on picture. So we have to pay attention. So together with several other enthusiastic teammates, I was assigned to put in place a national plan that would involve the federal and state governments, the civil society, and the local communities to understand and act on the cause of deforestation. And that was the point that make this as a strategic plan to combat deforestation. Say, go out there, talk with the different stakeholders, find out exactly why deforestation is happening, and let's act on those areas. This was a plan with 126 lines of actions and so on, involving tons of people, and I was coordinating one of the 3 segments of this plan later on. Through this effort, it allows to get bold milestones, such as the establishment of 50 million hectares of new protected areas. 50 million hectares of protected areas. This is the size of all the protected areas in the US. If taking into account the national forests and the national parks altogether is about 50 million hectares. So, and this was done in a period of 5 years, with some inspiration of the history of the protected areas in the US, and I can tell something about that after I finish the talk, so just not deviate too much. But there was a chapter on the story linked to your story. 1 million cubic meters of logs coming from illegal source were apprehended. 1 million cubic meters, how much is that? It's a line of 6,000 trucks with logs. That's the amount of logs that was apprehended in 3 years. A nightmare to deal with the timber, actually, afterwards. 700 people went to prison due to anti-corruption actions, and it increased significantly. Actually, we tripled the area of FSC certified forests during this period. There is also, we implemented kind of a close to real-time system to monitoring the forestry, so we could actually know when the deforestation was happening and act right away. So something that is actually coming out for many countries. And as a result of this concentrated effort, in the last 8 years, deforestation rate in the Amazon decreased almost 80%. There were some ups and downs, but the trend is very clear. It's going down. And I think it stayed there. Maybe go up a little bit, etc., but we'll never come back again for the old stuff. Because the instruments that are being implemented allows people to actually react fast if anything goes up a little bit. And the Brazilian society get used to a low number now. So we will not accept, a higher number. More than 50% of the reduction of the deforestation worldwide, the 16 to 13 in decrease on 16 million in the 90s to 13 million worldwide in the last decade, was due to the decline of deforestation in the Amazon. 2 lessons. One, the effort was very important. But the second lesson is, even if we didn't have decline in deforestation in the Amazon, it was happening also elsewhere. Maybe not. Maybe that was part of the thing, that the inspiration of what we were doing also happened on other places. Who knows? But the fact that it is a major contribution to the shift the trend on deforestation. Are we happy with that? Yeah, sure. Obviously, we should commemorate. It's like a, big achievement. But it's really far, really far from enough or far from sufficient. Even with the outstanding results we got in the last years, in 2013, this year, over 500,000 hectares were cut down in the Amazon. 500,000 hectares. This is something like 1 million acres or something like that. Although it's well below the 2.7 million hectares of years ago, it's still the largest deforestation rate in the world. And if we sum up the other biomes in Brazil, it's almost a double. So even with all this effort, putting everything down, the number was so high before that actually what we have now is still something outrageous. I mean, how can we cut down 500,000 hectares of forest in 1 year? And not that we need to do it. We certainly can live without doing that. The United Nations Forum on Forests which involves all countries in the world. It's the only body of the United Nations that actually involves every single country apart from the General Assembly, set a target for 2006 to reverse the loss of forest cover by 2015. Well, if you understand reverse, to say that instead of increasing, the acceleration, you're decreasing, that's okay. But that's not what we mean when we actually design this thing. I actually put these words there. We were talking about really reverse, which is stop the loss forest and maybe, increase forest. So we are not even close to that. So we are still far from this goal. We are still far from what we can do in Brazil. So I think we need to aim for much more, and we need to work for that. I would say that the next milestone in Brazil is to stop the loss of forest cover. We have to have that as our, mandate, as our, the thing that inspires us to move ahead. And maybe we can have the same goal for the world. And I think we should commit to that within this decade. By the end of 2020, we should not have net deforestation in the world. There's no reason why we can't do it by 2020. We know that it's technically feasible, even considering the need to increase food, fiber, and biomass production. And I'll give you an example of Brazil. In Brazil, there is more than sufficient space on the open area that we have already clear-cut to double or triple the food production, biomass, and fiber, including livestock, without any increase in area of deforestation, just by increasing productivity and implementing stewardship land management practices that we actually know them. It's not something that you have to develop new technology or something like that. It's things that we know, we just have to apply. Actually, if we do it properly, we can even save some areas to restore on critical spots that we like to have in forests. We have 200 million hectares of pasture in Brazil, an average 1 animal per hectare. 1 animal per hectare. Using simple techniques, 5 steps from Embrapa, which is our agricultural research organization, we can in 5 years increase to 3 per hectare. Simple as that, 3 per hectare. This would allow to have the double of the animals in the area and still save 70 million hectares, which is the size of all other crops in Brazil, 70 million hectares. You see, it's not that complicated. It's not rock science. It's something that we should just commit to ourselves and do it. And I think that's part of the challenge that we have now. So, I was concentrated in solving the equation of sustainability on managed forests. And I was, always interested on the connection with climate change. So I was always looking at, the things. It was very clear for me that deforestation accounts for 10% of the global emissions, something like that. And it's part of the problem. So because, we have a lot of emissions, so we are part of the problem. But also it can be a significant part of the solution, since it's one of the most efficient mechanisms to capture and storage carbon. In fact, this is what forms the basis of the RED, the mechanism, what we call RED+, reducing emission from deforestation, forest degradation, which is a mechanism that is being created on the framework of the Convention of Climate Change to support the countries and initiatives that are helping to avoid emissions from deforestation or reduce emissions from deforestation. The understanding of these connections eventually took me to design the Amazon Fund. It's a very simple results-based mechanism that receives a contribution of $5 per ton of carbon reduced on emissions from deforestation. So we basically measure how much we have on deforestation in average in a certain period, and then we compare to deforestation on the other period, have a difference in terms of land, and then we have a very conservative number on how much tons per hectare we have saved. We transform this in an amount of carbon, and then we receive contributions of $5 per ton. Actually, it's a very simple contract. I'm on law school. It's a 4-page contract. It's a 4-page contract of $1 billion. That's what the thing is, because I'm not a lawyer, so I couldn't make it. So it receives contribution from Norway, Germany, and it's investing now in dozens of scaling up initiatives for science, NGOs, public institutions, local governments, and indigenous people to promote sustainable forest management. But that was my, 10% of my time, just my day, thinking on, climate change and here and there. But then there was another side of the relationship of forest and climate change that struck me in 2008 and makes me rethink and actually reboot my professional life. I reinvent myself on this period. As a chief of forest service in Brazil, I have found and co-chaired an initiative called Mega Florestais. Yes, in Portuguese, Mega Florestais, because we didn't find the word in English afterwards. That's an annual meeting of the leaders of the forest agencies of the 10 largest forest countries in the world. So this includes US, Canada, Brazil, China, Indonesia, Australia, Peru, Congo. So every year we get together for a kind of a retreat to discuss issues about, how you're dealing with your problems with fire and all the stuff. And during the meeting in 2008, we were presented to the devastating consequences of the pine beetle infestation in the forests of British Columbia in Canada. There was millions and millions of hectares that is just dying. The forest is dying, standing up because of this infestation. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but in a summary, this beetle, the larva of the beetle, the larva we say, the small animal, it actually eats the tree from inside. And it normally grows on the spring and summer, and then on the autumn, gets to the top of the population, and then on the winter, when we have a very cold weather for 3 weeks, the population will almost disappear. So it's controlled. Now, we don't have this very cold weather for 3 weeks for 10 years now. And simply, instead of this population come down to 0.000000001 of the original one, it's actually come down to something like 0.0000003. But that's for an insect, is everything. And then it's an outbreak. So we can go to a place where you can walk, and then you have on the ground, this much quantity of the beetles actually walk on the beetles. It's a disaster. That's climate change. And I wasn't just impressed by the impact. I was actually shocked by the problems that the forest would have to deal with this problem. Because the guy was saying, look, I have to plan for 100 years. Because I plant a forest, a tree, and it takes 100 years to actually use that. It's not me, it's not my daughter. It will be like, my grandsons that will have to deal with my decision. Well, if the temperature increased 1.5 degrees, that's very bad. All infestation. Well, if it grows 3 degrees, then the beetle die. So what I do, I don't know if it will be 1.5. I don't know if it will be 3. What I do, I cut the trees, I leave the trees. What sort of decision you take? And then it got me like the impression that, what? Maybe my job, what I'm doing today is like trying to dry a piece of ice, like it never ends. So I come back to Brazil, that was November 2008, and I kept thinking, maybe I should just move to think about climate change, because climate change will destroy what I'm trying to save. So as strange as it could be the decision of a forester, to drop down, to be the chief of Forest Service, I decided to do it. And in December 2008, I left Forest Service and went to work with the Minister of Environment on climate change, thinking that we could influence somehow the process that was happening on the preparations for the conference on climate change in Copenhagen in 2009. So I passed the whole year working on that. So in 2009, with support from Avina Foundation, I have served as an advisor of the Minister of Environment to develop the concepts and the rationale that allows Brazil to shift gears and lead the emerging economies on the acceptance of the 2 degrees. Can you imagine? Brazil was against the 2 degrees limit. 450 ppm of concentration of CO2, and to commit to targets on mitigation and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So by 2009, when we got to Copenhagen, Brazil not just supported 2 degrees, but fight for the 2 degrees, the 450 ppm, and put a target on the table, which was a reduction of 36% of the greenhouse gas emissions by 2020. We are actually reduced 35% until now. So climate change seems, to me, almost kind of, if you look at just the pure numbers, it's almost an impossible challenge. In summary, to have a 60% chance of limiting the average growth of global temperature on 2 degrees, we need to cut down emissions by 80% by 2050. 80% by 2050. And we are still growing, right? So in other words, the emissions today are 50 gigatons, 15 billion tons of CO2. Billion tons. What is 1 ton of carbon? 1 ton of carbon is what a small car running about 15, 20 miles a day will emit in 1 year. So in 1 year, 1 car, small car, 1 ton, which is more or less the weight of the car. So imagine the car vaporized, that's how much it is emitting in 1 year. 1 cattle, 1 animal, 1 cattle, 1 year, 50 kilograms of methane, which is equivalent in terms of power on climate change to 1 ton of carbon. So 1 cattle, 1 car, 1 ton. If you travel from São Paulo to London, one way, 1 ton, economy class. If it's business, it's more. 1 ton. So one way to London, 1 car, 1 year, 1 cattle, 1 ton. I'm talking about 50 billion tons of CO2. That's what we are emitting today. So we have to reduce this to 10 gigatons, billion tons by 2050, while we incorporate over 2 billion people on the scene. We are 7 billion people. We will be in 2050 about 9 billion. So we have to incorporate them, but also, but reducing the emissions. Today, the average emission per capita in the world is about 7 tons per person per year. Average. All of us here, we emit more than 7. But average, 7. In India, 2. In Brazil, 7. We are in the average now. After decrease the emissions and etc., now we are in the average. We are not contributing to get the worst that we are right now. In 2050, if you want to emit 10 gigatons with 9 billion people, this is 1 ton per person. Or you have a car, or you eat meat, or you travel to Europe one way, on the basis of what we have now. So we have to completely reinvent ourselves if we want to do this on the right way. There's no space for, incremental improvements, or, let's just make another coal mine, plant, and etc., because later on we will find some technology to do that. This is right now. We should do this right now. In 2010, the average amount of GDP that we generate in the world for each ton of carbon that we emit was $1,200. $1,200. If you want to make it in 2050, we must make $20,000 out of each ton of carbon that we emit. So when anybody asks you what is low carbon economy, that's low carbon economy. 1 ton of carbon per person per year, $20,000 of GDP per ton of carbon that we emit. That's low carbon economy. There's no country in the world, there's no place in the world that is low carbon economy yet. And we have to get there. It's a revolution. Now, can we make it? Are we ready to face this challenge? That's the question I just always make myself. Now, 60% of global emissions of greenhouse gas come from energy production and consumption. So if you take the entire world, 60% energy, production and consumption. In Brazil, the same 60% is actually used to be deforestation. So the challenge for the world, energy. The challenge for Brazil, deforestation. The level of complexity, the same. Very complex for us to change the entire behavior of the people, etc., to get there. The decrease of deforestation in Brazil in 80% allow us to decrease 35% of our total greenhouse gas emission between 2005 to 2012. And it required a firm political and operational commitment to face enormous challenge and promote such a deep transformation in the Brazilian society. So I firmly believe that if we can face this challenge in Brazil on deforestation, which is our 60%, we definitely can do it on energy. But we need commitment. And by commitment, I mean we need the leaders, our global and regional leaders, to commit themselves. Now, the way we get the mood that we have nowadays on the climate talks, and I just have been in Warsaw for the COP19, I think. That COP is like the moonwalk dancing of Michael Jackson. It's more or less like that. You pretend that you are going forward, but you're going backwards. That's exactly what happened on the talks there. Really going backwards. So the way we are doing today will not get there. We are focusing too much on put responsibilities on the shoulders of the others. And this, work on the base of, I don't know if you have the saying in English, but eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, like playing like games like that. Nelson Mandela, who left us last week, leave us with a precious lesson that we can only move forward if we leave the past behind. We overcome our differences to work for a common cause as a planetary society. I think that's the main lesson. Leaders in the world today, we're there in South Africa, right? Making very beautiful speeches about Mandela. But I think they could honor his memory by really engaging in a sincere political commitment to an unprecedented, ambitious climate change agreement in 2015. Let's not try to blame one or the others, but just try to move forward, leaving the past behind. A global agreement on climate change is needed, but we should not wait for that to act. It's very important that we have that, but don't wait for that. Let's do our jobs on whatever we are doing. We must keep pushing and moving. To finalize, I'm a climber on, I used to be, because when my daughter born, my license was canceled or suspended until she's 16. But I used to climb high mountains like Kilimanjaro and, Aconcagua, Elbrus, and things like that. And as a climber, I really like this last paragraph of Mandela's biography, which says like this. Let's see if I can say this without getting emotional. I have walked that long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way. But I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many other hills to climb. I have taken a moment to hear, to rest, to still, to look for the view of this glorious vista that surrounds me. To look back on the distance I have come. But I can rest only for a moment, for with freedom comes responsibilities. And I dare not linger, for my long walk is not yet ended. So today, you have provided me with this moment to contemplate the achievements, but tomorrow I'll be back for the next mountain. That's my hope, that's my wish, that's my drive. Thank you.
So my name is Buzz Thompson, and I had the privilege of chairing the committee that chose the first recipient of the Bright Award. And after hearing Tasso's presentation this evening, I hope you all now fully understand why we chose him as the very first recipient of this particular award. And I want to thank him very much for coming here today and presenting not only, I think, a very inspirational and informative talk, but a very bright talk at the same time. So Tasso has agreed to answer some questions, and we do have a little bit of time before we'll move over into the reception area. And I understand that we have microphones on both sides, just one side? Or do we have two? We have two mics, okay. So this is all being taped and recorded, and so you need to ask your question in the microphone. And so what I would suggest is that if people who have questions raise your hand, then the mics will be brought around to you, and I will simply point from one side to the other, and whoever has the mic at that particular point in time, just ask your particular question. And so raise your hand if you have a question right now, and I'm going to start out by just asking, Tasso, you had mentioned earlier that the establishment of these immense new areas of reserves in Brazil had its genesis in part with the United States history of deforestation back in the 19th century. And I was just wondering if you could tell that story quickly.
That's a funny one. You don't know that story. That's happening when, when we found the Forest Service in Brazil, when I was appointed as the Chief of Forest Service, and well, the organization didn't exist. It was just like, okay, you are the first Chief of Forest Service, create the organization. Find a room, Actually, I occupy a room, a space to start there. And so first thing I did was, let's see, how other people did it. Right? And it just happened that in the US, you were commemorating the centennial year of the Forest Service. So I came for the commemorations and wanted to stay here. And they gave me as a present a film that was called The Greatest Good. If you haven't seen that, you should, because that's really a nice story about the forestries in the US. And in this film, they explain how the protected area systems in the US were created. And how, and it's a long story, but there is one moment in which the Congress take out from the president the authority to create new protected areas. And between the day that they approved this on the Congress and the day the president signed the law, they have 20 days or something like that, and they create 40 million acres they set aside 40 million acres of protected, which is half of your protection areas today in the US. I mean, considering national forests and national parks. So I got this as a lesson, say, if those guys haven't decided that at that day or that moment, nobody else could do it. So it's the legacy is the decision that they took at that very moment. Somebody can revert it, but they can't make it again. So I took this film back, make a lot of copies, and then we actually helped ask the American Embassy to make some translation in Portuguese. And then I gave this to some people, like the Minister of Environment. I sent to the cabinet of the president, and we showed to the governor of Pará that was taking a decision in the last 5 days in term that he has to create 8 million hectares or something like that on protected areas, and say, you know what? It's very simple. That's your legacy. And nobody will remember about the schools you build up and etc. But everybody will remember that you leave for the next generations those protected areas. And eventually, not because of that, but that was very inspiring to the chance to do that is for very few people, and they make it.
Okay, great. So why don't we start with that side of the room?
Tasso, is this microphone on? I would very much like to hear from both of you, perhaps, how the search committee found you. You're a shining light in the world of forest ecology and the environment, but still, there must be others. How did you find him?
I asked this question for him today, so.
I mean, I'll tell the very short story about how we actually found Tasso. But then I think he can talk about all the other people who he's been working with over time, who he told me today are, of course, equally worthy of this particular award. In our case, we started out by turning to Stanford faculty members who do work in South America and asked them for contacts of people in South America who they thought were doing interesting environmental work. The committee, which consists of 3 students and 2 faculty members, the 3 students then called all the people that we had identified through that and began to accumulate a network of names. And we ultimately came up with about 120 names. Of those 120 names, we then chose 5 consultants who have been working in the environmental area for a long time in South America. And then working with them, we came up with a list of 20 finalists, then turned it into a list of 3, and then Dean McGill sat down with those 3 and said, Tasso's our guy. So you want to talk about who else you work with?
Man. I would say that if you ask me, I would give a list of 20 people that could be here easily, that did amazing things in Brazil and I worked together. Right? Just to give one name, Beto Verissimo, for example, from Amazon, which is a very good friend. And he's kind of doing tons of works like this and actually helped me on many stuff. But, and I could go on and on with the people that have been working. But I think that what is really instrumental, actually, I think was some supports that we have along the way from people that didn't know us but could trust us. And I think that's the real meaning. One is Ford Foundation, because when Imaflora was just an organization that nobody knows, the organization was like 8 months, and we didn't have any funds and so on. And they came to visit us, spend an afternoon, and at the end of the afternoon they said, you know what, prepare a project of $100,000. That I'm talking about 1994. So it was a really an amazing amount of money. And then it's basically we run Imaflora for almost 3 years with this grant, which had no limitation. It just said, do it what you think that you should do. And it was completely unusual. So that was absolutely important at that point. It happened the same with Avina Foundation, which in many ways, they help me when I need to do something that, for example, to write this Amazon fund proposal. I come with the concept, taking a soup with a friend on the bar, on a napkin. I mean, like the idea. And then it's completely, I mean, people are always laughing on this idea because I was saying that, you know, I will ask money for something that I have already done. And say, how anyone will give money for something that you actually done? You know, that's not good. You want to buy organic bananas. How you buy organic bananas? You don't go to the supermarket and ask for a banana that will be, I promise you, will be organic next time. You know, they just buy organic bananas because they're organic, right? So that was my rationale. So I need someone to actually help me to put all the elements to transform this in a proposal, and I didn't have time to do it. And right away, Avina show up without even making too many questions, but in 1 week, they find out people that could help me to design and things. So this is very instrumental. So what I'm promising you is that you can be sure that this prize, I will come back in 3 years with something out of the blue. Even for me, because I don't know what I would do. So, but I'm still finding what would be the next milestone or the next big stone, I don't know. But I really related what you were doing with what happened with me in the beginning of Film Florida. Because I don't know anybody from this committee. I don't know anybody from here, the community, from anybody that I met actually from the 2 days here. So, and you're just, trusting me to for ideas. So I hope I can honor that properly.
Okay, I think we have time for one, maybe two questions. So one right here.
I wanted to know what you would comment about the work they're doing with the indigenous people in Paraná in trying to find a way to get carbon credits from Europe and America to help their economy.
You mean Panama or Paraná?
Paraná,
In Brazil, you mean?
in Brazil.
Okay.
There's the Environmental Defense Fund and the ISA, Socioambiental, are both working to get some kind of compensation so the indigenous people will cooperate. Could you comment?
Yeah. I don't know if I will say what you want to hear, but I will say it. I have a strange position on the initiatives. I think the problem with this type of RED projects, the way they are designed today, is that they assume that it's possible to prove that you avoid cutting trees. How you prove that you avoid cutting trees? There is just one way to do it. You have to prove it that you will cut the tree first, right? If you prove that you really will cut the tree, then you can say, no, I decide not to cut the tree. So what happened is that it's much easier for someone that is destroying the forest for years to come and step away and say, no, now I'll stop to cut down the forest, or I'll just cut half of what I was cutting. So I deserve some compensation for that because I'm decreasing deforestation. You take an indigenous people that is there for years, saving the forest, cutting down anything, he can't prove. You're not decreasing any deforestation. You never clear cut the forest. How are you decreasing deforestation? So it ends up on a conversation which is completely absurd on how you compensate that. So my take on that is certainly we need to pay for the people that conserve forests. But it has nothing to do with the carbon itself. It has nothing to do with proving the carbon. I don't want to see indigenous people having to spend their time, their money, their efforts, measuring trees to prove that they have the carbon dioxide. I just want them to get it. And so it's how the Amazon Fund works. The Amazon Fund is a mechanism to disconnect the necessity of identifying who actually decreased the deforestation to actually give the benefit. The take is, we measure, we know how much we decrease deforestation in the entire Amazon. I don't care who actually cooperates for that. I just have it, I prove it, and I get the funds. Now, when it comes to use the funds, I would just give the funds for the ones who really are helping to protect the forest. They don't need to prove me anything on the carbon. They need to prove that they are actually committed to forest conservation. So I don't know if this group that you were mentioning is actually is a beneficiary of the Amazon Fund, but there are other 4 or 5 initiatives with indigenous people and local communities and so on, which are receiving funds from the Amazon Fund to actually pay for the environmental services. So it's kind of my take on this is make it simple. Don't ask the people to prove something that has no meaning for them, and just make the funds and the support to flow to them.
Okay, looking at the time, I actually think that probably it would make most sense to break at this point, and we invite all of you to join us for a reception, which will be in the next room over, and Tasso will be there, and so you'll have an opportunity to talk to him one-on-one or in small groups over there. But before we adjourn to the reception, I want you to join me again in congratulating and thanking the first recipient of the Bright Award for Environmental Sustainability, Tasso Azevedo.